A month has already passed. 1 month since the so-called Operation Epic Fury was launched without congressional vote. 1 month of strikes, counter-strikes, and a world held hostage by the Strait of Hormuz. Tonight, the war enters its 5th week, and the stakes have never been higher. The Houthis have entered the fray, firing ballistic missiles at occupied Palestine. The USS Tripoli, with 3,500 US Marines, has arrived in the region, and all eyes are on the KHARG Island, the economic lifeline handling 90% of Iran's crude exports. Is a ground invasion being prepared? Meanwhile, Iran demonstrates it can strike at 4,000 kilometers, targeting the US-UK base at Diego Garcia. The Trump administration, scrambling to contain the economic fallout, turns to Venezuelan oil and suspends a century-old shipping law. Russia calls for international condemnation of strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Bill Clinton warned us, we are breaking things overseas, but also things inside our own democracy that are very hard to put back together. Tonight, we ask, whose war is this, and at whose expense? All this and more, shortly. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's special edition. And before we bring in our guest, let's get a detailed update on the past 24 hours, the strikes, the diplomatic maneuvers, and the economic shockwaves. We turn to our colleague, Kareem Musfawi.
With the confrontation in the Middle East entering its first month, tensions remain extremely high. On Saturday, Iranian authorities reported multiple casualties and widespread damage following US and Zionist strikes targeting residential areas and key infrastructure in Tehran, Isfahan, and Bushehr. For its part, the Iranian military said it launched missile strikes on strategic sites in occupied Palestinian territories and several Gulf states. In this context, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has warned of a firm and decisive response if attacks on the country's infrastructure continue.
We have said many times that Iran does not carry out preemptive attacks, but will retaliate strongly if our infrastructure or economic centers are targeted. To the countries of the region, if you want development and security, don't let our enemies run the war from your lands.
While the situation on the ground continues to escalate, diplomatic efforts are ongoing but appear to be struggling to end the war. Moscow said that Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has discussed with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi the possibility of reaching a diplomatic settlement of the war in the Middle East. For his part, Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, announced the possibility of talks between Washington and Iran this week.
We think there will be meetings this week. We're certainly hopeful for it. Ships are passing. That's a very, very good sign. And I think the president wants a peace deal. But he also believes in and I believe in it too, peace through strength. Without pressure, you never get anybody to the table.
With U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggesting the military operation in Iran could end within weeks, the world is watching with concern the development of a conflict that could reshape the future of the Middle East region.
And to dissect this critical moment where military escalation meets diplomatic chaos and economic warfare, we are joined by an exceptional panel from across the globe. In Manama, we have Bahrain, Dr. Ahmed Khuzai, founder and political consultant at Khuzai Associates LLC, Washington, D.C. Hello there, Professor, and thank you for agreeing to be with us tonight.
Sorry, Rex. Okay, good night. Good evening.
Thank you indeed. And in London is Mr. Mu'tasim Al-Harith Al-Dawi, CEO of Trend Born Strategies, a geopolitical analyst tracking the shifting alliances and the global economic fallout of this conflict. Hello there, Mr. Mu'tasim, and thank you for agreeing to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure is ours. And also, we have Mohammed Krisasi, a financial analyst and geopolitical analyst as well from New York. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi, for agreeing to be with us.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for the invite.
Thank you indeed. And all right, let's get this debate started. My first question goes to you, Dr. Ahmed Khuzai. You are actually based in Bahrain right now. Don't know, perhaps it's just a short vacation apparently, but Bahrain is home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet. The USS Tripoli has arrived with 3,500 Marines, an amphibious assault force trained for ship-to-shore operations. U.S. Central Command has already struck KHARG Island's military infrastructure. Iranian officials have warned that any attempt to occupy Iranian islands will trigger retaliation against regional countries' infrastructure. From your vantage point in the Gulf, is Washington preparing a ground invasion according to you? And if so, are the Gulf monarchies ready for the retaliation that will inevitably follow? Or are they perhaps quietly pleading with the White House to actually step back?
That's a vital question that you just basically put on the table, but it's a difficult one to address. Just as you mentioned right now about the USS Tripoli, we're talking about 3,500 Marines on the ground, which adds up to the previous number that basically totals between 5,000 to 7,000 Marines on the ground in total. And that's a huge number basically to invade just one island. Now, when we're talking about the KHARG Island, it's a strategic point of view for the Americans, that's for sure. But from a military point of view, I'm not sure how vital is that, especially that their backs will be opened from the Iranian side. Now, that will trigger a major escalation, of course, and will basically lead the Iranians to carry an extra aggression. Of course, over the past 1 month, the Iranians carried out attacks over 11 countries in the region. And yesterday only, they started talking about even taking it out over Syria, which basically will increase the numbers. Now, for the Iranians, how vital is that and how important is that for them to expand the war even furthermore? That's on one hand. On the other hand, if we're talking about the Gulf states, as you just mentioned, that's a vital question, especially that our arsenal of military assets, it's mostly defensive. Now, in order for us to take it forward, that will change the whole calculus and the whole war. Starting with, the Gulf states have been taking a defensive stance for multiple reasons. The most important one is that until now they are fighting a war they did not call for. They just found themselves in the middle of it. That's one. The second, which is as well very important, is that their most important asset is their stability when it comes to foreign investments, when it comes to how they treated their neighbors, and as well how they govern their people. So to take it further, that will escalate the war from a retaliated one so far by the Gulf states to an open war with Iran, which will basically increase the cost of this war for the Gulf states. During the first 2 weeks, it was estimated that about $60 billion were in losses. So we're not sure how long we'll be able to take that as a defensive stance for the Gulf states and change the minds of the Gulf states to go into offense rather than defense.
Mm-hmm. And adding to that point, Mr. Ahmed Khuzai, Kuwait's airport was hit by Iranian-linked drones. Abu Dhabi's aluminum plant, the region's largest, was struck as well. Saudi bases were attacked, injuring U.S. service members. Yet we see no military response from the Gulf monarchies. Is this passivity, according to you, a strategic choice, or Gulf leaders finally are realizing the U.S. security umbrella has become perhaps ineffective and a magnet for retaliation rather than a shield to protect him?
When it comes to the first part of the question, of course, I mean, as I just mentioned, the strategic stance for the Gulf is a defensive one. That's how they have built their arsenal, that they have how they have built their basically relationship around the Middle East. Now, in order for them to change that, it will come at a cost, that's for sure. Just to give an example, the business estimation of Dubai as a city on its own is priced at $117 billion, while Tehran, a much larger city, which is the capital of Iran, is basically priced at $55 billion. So there's a big basically a big amount when it comes to that comparison. As for the second part of the question, when it comes to the American umbrella, it's a yes and a no kind of answer. When the United States of America decided to start the war along with Israel against Iran, of course, they did not give anybody a chance to protest it or basically to stop it. From there, we're talking about how the Gulf will rebuild its allyship and its calculations in the future. It will all depend on how the war will end.
Mm-hmm. But then, do you think that the monarchies perhaps are privately telling Washington to de-escalate or try to find a solution, especially that we see the costs of this war on their own infrastructure is really rising, Mr. Ahmed?
Of course, what you just mentioned earlier about the airport in Kuwait, that includes every single airport in the Gulf. When it comes to water desalination plants, oil refineries, we're talking about shopping malls in some cases. The war is already expanding, but do we want it to go to a further state? No, of course not. At the same time, if we look at it from a Gulf point of view and a Gulf perspective, is after the war, what's the state of Iran is going to look like? Is it going to be as strong as? Because that will create a big problem for the Gulf. And how will it play from there is as well another big problem of how things will be taken forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. And speaking of the fact that the war is becoming really regional, I turn to you, Mr. Mu'tasim Al-Harith Al-Dawi. Yesterday, the Houthis announced their first military operation in support of Iran, firing ballistic missiles at occupied Palestine. 2 missiles launched, intercepted, but then the strategic signal is quite clear. We saw what Houthi attacks did to global shipping in 2023 and 2024. Now, with this new front opening, are we looking at a complete closure of the Red Sea corridor and Bab el-Mandeb? And what does that mean for the Gulf states whose economies depend on these routes, especially when vessel traffic through the Strait of Hormuz is already down to 95%?
Well, I don't think for the time being the Bab el-Mandeb straits will be closed. I think it's just a strategic symbol action by the Houthis for the time being, and everyone who has been closely following the developments over the last month have noticed that the Houthis were not involved. I mean, they were kept as probably as a strategic asset or the strategic reserve to Iran, and they only acted when they found the time is right to send a signal message, as you have just mentioned. And therefore, I think for the time being, it's not a real threat as to sailing through the Red Sea and through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. However, this might easily turn, or depending on the developments over the next few days. As for the second part of your question with regard to Gulf countries, I think even if the Bab el-Mandeb Straits is closed, there's an alternative sailing around the Cape of Good Hope. However, that will be rather costly. That it will increase the shipping costs, insuring costs, etc., which will even further add a financial strain on the budgets of the GCC countries, which are already strained due to the war and the semi-closure of the Hormuz Straits.
Mm-hmm. And now, if we look east, Mr. Mu'tasim, we see, for example, China, India, Japan, and South Korea facing rather an energy nightmare. China buys 80% of Iran's oil exports, much through petro-yuan arrangements, and Japan gets 90% of its oil from the Gulf, South Korea 70%. Now, these are U.S. allies and competitors alike. Is Washington's calculation that Asian economies will simply absorb the pain, or is this war accelerating perhaps a global realignment where China and India increasingly bypass the U.S. that financial system for energy trade? And what does that mean for the petrodollar?
I think that the time being, the India-China rivalry will be a better, or will have a higher value as to assume that they are going to collaborate or cooperate with regard to trying to elevate the energy crisis. However, one element that should be taken into account, in my opinion, is the fact that the American foreign policy cannot be trusted, meaning that even with its partners, like India, for example, okay, it does has the tendency to try to weaken those partners in order to have them rely more, even increasingly, on it. We have seen that repeatedly over the last few days. Even with there's a stark example of this with the American policy toward the EU bloc. I mean, in that case, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, or however you might want to call it, military action or military invasion, regardless, it was used by the Americans as a pretext in order to reduce the EU's economical stance in the world, which reduced it from being the second largest economy of the world, I mean, to a teetering stance of what it used to be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. And now let me welcome from Vienna University Professor Dr. Heinz Gärtner, international security expert at the University of Vienna and the International Institute for Peace, a specialist in strategic stability and the nuclear dimension of this crisis. And my question goes to you, Professor. You are an international security expert, and this week we have seen U.S.-Israeli strikes hit the Ardakan Yellowcake facility, the heavy water facility, and for the third time the Bushehr nuclear power plant in Iran. Now, meanwhile, we have Russia's foreign ministry saying these attacks simply invalidate the non-proliferation treaty, IAEA verification mechanisms, and nuclear safety conventions. Now, from a strategic stability perspective, what precedent has been set here? If a nuclear power plant under IAEA safeguards can be struck with impunity, what does that mean for nuclear safety globally? And is the world now on the brink of a nuclear cascade, perhaps, as analysts like Vali Nasser have warned?
Good evening. May I respond in two parts? The first part is more of a technical nature. Of course, international law prohibits the strike and the attack of nuclear facilities, whether it's a reactor or it is an enrichment site. So Israel already attacked Natanz, Fordo, Isfahan already before. That's prohibited as well. Bushehr is not attacked directly, so there has been some strikes close to Bushehr. Bushehr, of course, is a reactor, and if Bushehr is hit, it would be really, really dangerous, because that would have similar consequences as the fallout of a nuclear bomb. So everybody should be careful not to attack a nuclear a reactor. So far, Israel didn't do so, and the US didn't do so. But it is more dangerous than the other facilities, the enrichment facilities like Natanz, which has been hit now and already in 25 and already in 2021. When it comes to international law and the IAEA resolutions, of course, IAEA resolutions forbid the strike on nuclear facilities, and also referring to the Geneva Convention, which prohibits the strike on installations with dangerous forces, as it is called. So, and there is also a reference to the UN Security Council resolutions. So the second part of my answer is because now we have reached a situation where nuclear coercion might come into play. So just mentioning that you have nuclear weapons, you might want to change the behavior of the advisory. So already the Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan in 1973 did so, signaling to Henry Kissinger, if you don't support us, we still have nuclear weapons. So it is possible if the US withdraws now from Iran, from the war, that Netanyahu might say, yeah, then we still have nuclear weapons. But we also, of course, know that
So it seems that we're losing the connection with you, Professor Heinz-Gärtner. Let me turn now to Mohammed Krissassi. If we are to witness some kind of an attack on a nuclear facility in Iran, what would be the devastating toll, according to you, Mr. Mohammed Krissassi?
Well, it will be devastating for the area. Already you are seeing all the destruction that you have not only in Iran, but in Israel, as well as the GCC country. Again, I don't think they are going to that extent. Yes, for sure, the oil is very important in that region, but as you said before, the Trump administration released, because they are pragmatic, they did even, the famous Jones Act waiver to sell the oil and from Venezuela. Now, how you are going to explain to the world that you did aggress Iran? We have a tendency to forget Iran here was attacked by Israel and the US. Iran didn't do anything. They are just responding. And when I hear, for example, some responsible from the GCC that they say they are a victim of Iran, they are not the victim. When you host the American base, 14 of them all around Iran, and Iran is suffering about all this rain of bombing on their country, what do you think Iran is supposed to do? Don't come now and cry wolf when you are the one who are hosting the murderer, the one who are doing genocide in Lebanon, in Gaza, and now they want to do the same thing in Iran. Now, when you talk about how we are going to explain this, I don't know. This is why I'm just saying that let's put all the things in factuality. Iran was aggressor. And when you heard, and I repeat what I was saying, the GCC complaining that they are the victim, don't forget that during 7 years, they were the one who are financing Iraq to go and try to invade Iran. And Iran is a civilization of 5,000 years. They know what they are doing. They have been attacked since, as I said many times during this show, 1952, 53, 1979, 2008, and today. They are the only one in that area who stand to the hegemony of Israel and America. And again, I don't know how we are going to continue like that. I don't think, in my point of view, it's going to stop maybe in matter of, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks. They cannot continue like this. Now they did a war by choice. Now is an economical war. The global world is a touch. You are saying before that, for example, China 80% is of their oil come from Iran. You said about Japan, 90%. You said about South Korea, 70%. These three countries that I named, they are friends of USA, of America. They are going to react, specifically China, because they know we cannot sustain longer than this. And if you want, I can continue to say how to explain this to the American, but I give you back the floor.
Thank you indeed. Let me include Mr. Mu'tasim here. Mr. Mu'tasim, we have seen a lot of violations happening in this war, and one of them perhaps the strikes on a school. I can also mention a strike on a university, and not to mention the power plant, like I asked Dr. Heinz Gertner. Now, if you come to ask the American side, they would say that this is a limited operation and it's not a war. Although, can such limited operations between two inverted commas justify hitting such civilian infrastructure when we have the very former American President Bill Clinton saying that this is illegal and it goes against all the conventions?
Well, to start with, I mean, let me emphasize that this war, it's not a limited operation. I mean, you can't apply cosmetic surgery to it. It's a war. It's an aggression. It goes against the UN Act and it goes against loads of international laws. And obviously, it's a violation of sovereign states. Areas and lands and skies. Okay, so I mean, let's put this aside. This is a fact that cannot be denied. I mean, whatever sugar coating is applied to it, this is a fact that's solid. This is a solid fact. However, on the other side, okay, if we want to apply rules, it should be applied universally. And in this context, when we talk about a Zio-American aggression against the Republic of Iran, okay, we should also, by the same token, apply the same principle and say that there is another aggression, okay, that's taken place since the very first day of this war against Iran. But in this case, unfortunately, it is committed by Iran against its Arabian neighbors. I mean, just to give a couple of stark examples, Saudi Arabia has been hit more than 800 times. Okay, and mind you, those were not only targeted at American bases or whatever American bases claimed or existing in reality in Saudi Arabia. There's more. Okay, we're talking about the gas, the Qatari gas industry. Okay, will be dead for the next 3 to 5 years, pending repairs and maintenance, etc. Okay, your guest mentioned that the fact that the presence of some American bases in the Gulf countries, okay, was the reason that those countries were hit. But this is not. This is partly true. Okay, because when we're considering this element in our analysis, we need to for the analysis to be impartial, we need also to take into account the fact that those GCC countries, okay, have explicitly emphasized it to the government of Iran that those bases will not be used in any attack, any aggression against Iran. And those countries did keep their word, they did keep their promise. So there's no justification for Iran, okay, as there is no justification, as there is no justification for the Americans / Zionist state to attack Iran, okay. There's, by the same token, there is no justification for Iran to attack its Arabian neighbors. Moreover, okay, let's put it this way: the foreign aggressors, that is to say, America / Zionist state, okay, will at some point, hopefully in the near future, will depart, will leave this region. How will a huge question arises in this context? How will Iran, okay, manage its relations with Arabian neighbors going forward, or that is following this, for the end of this war? Okay, whereas it has managed to destroy whatever grains of good relations or good intentions that were increasingly built over the last, say, 2 years. Just to give an example, the rapprochement that what is in the evolving between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Okay, that was culminated in the visit made by the Minister of Defense, Saudi Minister of Defense, Prince Khalid bin Salman, to Tehran, where he met the late Murshid, or grand leader. Okay, this is all gone down to rubble now. Okay, and the countries, all the countries in that region, that is to say, Iran and its Arabian neighbors. Okay, they will need to start from nil going forward. Okay, so the mess that has been created in the region. Okay, by these retaliatory or pseudo-retaliatory actions or attacks by Iran. Okay, are not the ramifications of those attacks are not limited to the physical damage, say to oil refineries, etc., etc. No, it goes beyond, far beyond that. Okay, to the how will be those countries manage and operate and coordinate their relations going forward, which is a huge geopolitical concern, not only for those countries, the directly concerned countries, but for the rest of the world going forward, because this is the region where the vast majority of oil and gas come from. Okay, and therefore it's a global concern.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. And this leads me to the next question. I get back to you, Dr. Haynes Gartner. Earlier we had that connection problem, and perhaps you would like to finish your point when it comes to European strategic autonomy when a conflict in the Gulf can directly threaten the continent.
I'm sorry for this interruption. Sure, the Europeans are torn between loyalty towards President Trump and strategic autonomy. So they want to decide themselves whether they get involved in a foreign war. And you hear once in a while saying the Europeans, that is not our war. And that's...
Mm-hmm. It seems that we are still having that connection problem. Let's try to fix that and get back to it. Now, let me redirect the question to Mr. Ahmed Khuzai. Mr. Ahmed, if we come to look at the European continent, which is dependent on energy products from so many countries, since it has no such products itself, and most majority comes from the Gulf countries. Now, if we see European strategic economy being jeopardized in a way, especially amidst this conflict in the Gulf, can this threaten the continent and perhaps drag them into war as well?
I'm not sure about their involvement in the war over the foreseen future, but their situation is a place where nobody wants to stand in at the moment. Prior to the Gulf issue, they've been facing deficiency in energy imports due to the Russian-Ukrainian war. And that today, basically what's happening in the Gulf area is increasing that. Of course, it's putting the Europeans at an extremely tough situation, especially that it comes right after the increase of taxation and tariffs that are coming from the American side by Donald Trump. So, yes, they're trying now to mediate as much as they could. They're trying to help in a passive way, not to be involved in the war, but to keep the region as much as possible as safe as it gets.
Mm-hmm. And now, what could be a way out of this energy crisis in Europe, since we don't see a lot of people capable to perhaps compensate for that lack of energy they are having from the Gulf?
It's not something that anybody can construct, since we just spoke about the issue. It's somehow global. It started in Europe, it's escalating in Venezuela, and now it's in the region here in the Middle East. There's a shortage, of course, in energy supply. That's evident, and it's affecting major powers and major trade powers like China, like Europe, and we're talking about the rest of the world as well. Today, any winning side that will be considered winning in this situation today is the side that will get out with less damages, a side that will get out with less compensations. And that's the biggest problem every side has today. If we're talking about Iran, if we're talking about the rest of the Middle East, or if we're talking about even the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to get back to Professor Dr. Heinz Gärtner with the previous question. How do you see this yourself, Doctor? Is Europe now in the crosshairs of this conflict? Are you with me, Dr. Heinz Gärtner? Mm-hmm. All right. It seems that we haven't got back or restored the connection with Dr. Gärtner. So, Mohammed Karissasi, since you've been tracking this war, you have been following closely the economic impact. Now, what can you tell us about the repercussions that are felt, perhaps domestically in the USA, when it comes to this costly war?
Well, in the USA, we begin to feel, of course, that war, but it's not because of the oil. It's because of the price that is costing to American. We are talking about $2 billion a day, and for a war of choice. Now, maybe I'm going to think out of the box. America doesn't suffer about the oil supply. America exports more oil than they import, but they want to play the monopolistic, to be the monopolistic power in the market. This is why they went to Venezuela, which is about 1/3 of the world reserve, and they want to go to the walk in the park in Iran, because if you add Venezuela and Iran is 1/3 of the reserve of the world. But, it was the calculus was not that great. Now you are talking about what we are saying in America. Before, I think you talk about Clinton and you said the key-shaped impact. I just would like to explain a little bit what is it before I go further. The K-shaped war, as described by former President Bill Clinton, is he referred to an economic impact where the wealthy remain insulated or even profit out of it, while us, the lower and middle income population, are crushed by the secondary effect of the US-Israel war with this Iran. The phenomena primarily is driven by the spike, as you said before, in the energy, and of course, the causality will go to the food price, will go to the traveling, for example, the plane ticket, etc., etc. So the key-shaped impact is on the upper arm. The wealthy household, they have higher income. They are not going to suffer about that. They are going to continue their luxury spending. But you have the lower arm, and then can be a problem for Mr. Trump to explain what he's doing, because the election in midterm is coming. And as you know, the midterm election, always the president in place lose the majority. And then I think this is why I still optimistic, beside whatever is going on now, that Trump, at least his entourage, is going to explain to him that he have to stop this madness. Now to the question, Juan, that you said, that you asked the question about if Europe is involved. Europe is already involved. Europe is part of NATO. 14 countries, they are already involved, and they are helping in one way or another the war that is taking place and this destruction of the structure in Iran. They are involved. Don't trade. How can I say that? The tree cannot hide the forest. They are there. Look, yesterday or the day before, even Ukraine is at war with Russia. What do? They go to Saudi Arabia and they want to sell them the drones. How you are going to explain that to anyone that saying that Europe is not involved. The president of the European Community, the woman, went to Trump and say what he was doing basically is helping the world to be at peace, because Iran should not have the nuclear power, which is nonsense. Iran never followed the nuclear power, the military one. They just want to use it as everyone else, as a deterrent. You have a country like North Korea, a dictatorship, a bloody dictatorship. Nobody talk about, the human right. Nobody talk about all what's going on, and this what North Korea is doing, and threatening Japan and South Korea. Why they don't talk about it? Why? Because they have the deterrent. They have the nuclear bomb. Israel have the nuclear bomb, but it's not part of the treaty. USA have the nuclear bomb. What they are going to do? They are going to blow the world. And now Iran want to defend themselves. And they want to disrupt it. Who are they to say you cannot have the nuclear bomb? Who are they? They are the ones who used it on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Not any Arab country, not any other country, but America. And now they are talking about peace, democracy. Let's be real. Let's, talk. As I said before, factuality. Maybe I am of the range of the discussion today, but all this is a global chaos. Is again and again the Occident doesn't like any country other than the Judeo-Christian one to be in power and to be self-sufficient. And this is why America is there. Don't lie. I don't want to hide it. Why you have a genocide in South Lebanon? Nobody is talking about it. Beirut is going to be the next Gaza. And what you are doing? We are talking now to impeach Iran to defend himself. I'm sorry, this is not the way to talk, not about economy. The economy, like in 1973, is going to go back. It's not going to be at the barrel at $100. Now, the barrel today, I think it was closed at 112, and it's going to go down because Wall Street and the city are not going to allow Trump to go on this craziness. Mm-hmm. We cannot continue like that. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you indeed. Let me just get back to Professor Dr. Heinz Gertner. Professor, I asked you earlier, now that Europe is caught in the crosshairs of this conflict or this war, Iran has actually demonstrated it can strike at 4,000 kilometers, hitting the US-UK base at Diego Garcia. Now, Defense Express reports that with this range, Iran can now reach every European country, except perhaps Portugal. European leaders have so far watched this war from a distance, with Germany even being criticized by Donald Trump for not meeting his expectations. Professor, is Europe finally waking up to the fact that this war is coming to its doorstep? And what does it say about European strategic autonomy, as I asked you earlier, and then we didn't have the chance because of the connection issue?
Yeah, sorry for that again. No, I'm not so sure about the 4,000 kilometers, because it was not really confirmed officially. Iran has missiles only with a range of 2,500 kilometers. But nevertheless, of course, the Europeans are affected, especially because of the economy and because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And sure, they're nervous because of the rising oil prices, energy prices. So that's why the Europeans are concerned now, and they have the feeling they have to act. So, but they don't really know what to do. President Trump is pressing them to do something to get NATO involved. But the Europeans hesitate to act militarily because, of course, they have the feeling and they know that once you're militarily involved in this conflict, you might be dragged in even deeper. And we know from the military experts that there's a possibility of mission creep, so that there is a certain point of no return when you started a military operation. So the Europeans are afraid of it, but of course there is pressure, and there was a debate within NATO even to invoke Article 5, the security commitments. That was the case when a drone flew towards the military base in Cyprus. Also, the European Union discussed security commitments according to Article 42.7, but they didn't do so because once you are really trigger this article, all member states have to get involved. So now the Europeans they want to, of course, stress all the time the strategic autonomy, but on the other hand, they have to please President Trump, because they want to demonstrate they are loyal to him. So the best thing what the Europeans can hope for is a ceasefire, because militarily they cannot open the Strait of Hormuz. It's much too dangerous. Not even the US is doing this, and the Europeans do not have the means to do it. So, but there's a lack of initiatives by the Europeans for diplomatic solution. So Pakistan is now somehow trying to mediate. Why shouldn't the Europeans try to do it? Because they are affected. No military solution, only diplomatic solution. So the Europeans should do something in that way.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the diplomatic solution, this leads me to the next question to Dr. Ahmed Khuzai. Dr. Ahmed, while bombs are falling, Pakistan, Turkey, and even Egypt are trying to open diplomatic channels between Tehran and Washington. Iran, however, denies any direct talks, calling U.S. claims psychological warfare to buy time. Now, from your experience bridging Washington and the region, are these diplomatic moves genuine attempts to stop the war, or are they perhaps just a cover while the U.S. continues to reinforce its military posture?
The scenes, the attempts for negotiations started on the first day by multiple players, and then it led us to where we are standing today. Now, Iran don't want to negotiate while they are under pressure, while the Washington are playing the dual track. They're pressuring while basically pressuring for negotiations, while at the same time are attacking Iran. This dual track basically works both ways, even on the Iranian side. That's somehow, again, that Iran has been playing for some time. And it seems that so far it's going nowhere, because since last year, the war that is known as the 12-Day War, it started right after negotiations failed. And then even this year, the war started right after negotiations failed. And as well right now, before the talks of a possible negotiation started, Iran has basically put forward the 6 points that they wanted to negotiate. That seems to be impossible by not just the United States and Israel, but as well for the Gulf, especially that they want full control over the Strait of Hormuz and other factors, which seems to be rejected by the United States with their 16 points plan, that the first 6 points are the exact opposite of what Iran wants to basically be granted. Now, that being said, it's not an easy way forward, especially that the way, just to reply to the respected Mr. Mohammed earlier about the bases in the Gulf. Now, if we put the bases as the most important point for the Iranians with their aggression against the Gulf, we'll have to go back in history to understand that, for example, the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain was established in 1975, which is exactly the same year that the United Nations ruled ruled out the independency and sovereignty of the Kingdom of Bahrain back in the day, while Iranians have been trying to claim it ever since until today. When it comes to Kuwait, for example, the oil ship problems that the Iranians were hijacking them and taking them away from the Kuwaitis, and then from the time that Kuwait as well invaded, Iraq invaded Kuwait as well, we started having these bases for a reason. If that's a problem, then why did Iran started to have the Russian bases that started to hit Syria years ago? It's a complicated issue that only calming down and sit down to negotiations will solve.
But Dr. Ahmed Khuzai, I mean, perhaps the reason you mentioned for having the U.S. bases in the region is one of protection. Now, as an average Gulf citizen, wouldn't they be disappointed that these bases are not really serving their purpose and they are overwhelmed by the missiles and drones being launched from Iran? And at the same time, they are serving the exact opposite of what they were meant for. So instead of protecting them, they have become the magnet for these strikes.
Yeah, as well. We'll have to go back and read the paperwork for establishing these bases. These bases mostly were established to keep a status quo. That's one. And of course, they are American bases. It's American soil. It has nothing to do with protecting the Gulf states. Mostly, they are for American expansion purposes or keeping, let's say, the American interest at safe. When it comes to protecting the Gulf, it has nothing to do with that. And as you can tell, since day one of the war, every soldier from these bases were deployed either in international waters or in the Arab Sea, as well as ever since we've been depending on ourselves only here in the Gulf states, defending ourselves against the Iranian aggression. So it's not the same purpose that's been advertised as much as reality is a different kind of truth when it comes to having facts.
Mm-hmm. Let me turn now to Mr. Mu'tasim. Mr. Mu'tasim, do you think that perhaps diplomacy can succeed eventually, although we have many factors that play against it? For example, when we have mediators, one of the mediators is allies of the parties in the aggression, and the other side refuses perhaps to negotiate under fire.
Well, I think there needs to be an eminent. Let's put it this way: an eminent end of fire, a ceasefire. I don't think will come eminently. It will take some time for the three major forces or major states involved in this war. That is to say, Iran, America, in no specific order: Iran, America, and the Zionist state. Okay, to come to this, to realize that this is an untenable situation that cannot go on forever. Okay, and this will be only be manifested in the number of casualties, the number of physical damages to infrastructure, etc., etc. I mean, and including depletion of military assets. There were used about the huge lack of military assets in America, etc. I mean, and therefore I would say that it will take some time for the ceasefire to evolve. However, from that point onwards, I think there could be good ground for a serious diplomatic negotiations without the usual games that were associated to the June 2025 talks or the recent one just prior to the war. I think next time the diplomatic talks will be much more candid, and they will involve, and I think they should involve much more stakeholders, including the UN, the African Union, the Arab League, the EU, and other international key regional and international players at those negotiations, just to ensure that those negotiations will lead, if not to a permanent solution, or they should lead at last to at least to a solution, a ceasefire that will last for at least quite a number of years without us going back and forth through these sorry to say, Tom and Jerry game of talks and then war, and that started last year.
Mm-hmm. But Mr. Mu'tasim Al-Harith, I have to refer to what former President Bill Clinton dared to ask. He says, and I quote, "Every time I see a decision that doesn't make any strategic sense, I've learned to ask another question. Who does it serve?" Clinton noted that Benjamin Netanyahu has long sought a confrontation with Iran because as long as there is war, there is also a reason to stay in power. 5 weeks in, with U.S. casualties mounting, with the global economy teetering, with no clear exit strategy, is this war being fought for American interests or for Israeli interests? And if it's the latter, how long will the American public and the American Congress, according to you, continue to accept it?
Well, I think in this case, it has become quite plain to everyone that American President Trump was lured by the Zionist state to this war or aggression, if you will. Okay. It is becoming increasingly untenable for the Americans, especially what with the increasing number of casualties, American soldiers falling, unfortunately, and then public pressure mounting inside America. Sorry, mounting and there's one additional element which you have mentioned earlier, which is the economic pressure of the average Joe on the street. You have the prices of petrol are increasing, and this is causing more anger within the general public, and this might be followed by rationing of petrol and other oil products, etc. And again, these political popular pressure is mounting inside America. And also inside the Zion states, because many, even within the Zion state, are realizing that Netanyahu for him it was just a strategy of running forward, trying to evade being convicted in court. So start a war and just and pretend that everything is fine and just wait for the outcome. I mean, this cannot go on forever. Okay. Sooner or later, everyone will need to sit down and just talk it over like mature adults. And further violations of international laws, etc. I mean, it just has become increasingly annoying to everyone that international laws, the UN Charter, and other relevant treaties are just being totally neglected by everyone. I mean, take, for example, the elimination of Iranian leaders, etc. I mean, this has become a huge question arises. Has this become the norm now? Mm-hmm. That we don't deal with politicians or we don't use the diplomatic channels. We just go around and eliminate everyone who we don't like. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think this is a valid question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. And now, since you mentioned the economic aspect, I'd like to get back to Mr. Mohammed Krissassi with this question. I still quoting Bill Clinton, who described a K-shaped impact. The people at the top ride it out, and the people at the bottom get crushed. We are already seeing rising hunger worldwide, with the World Food Programme warning of record levels of food insecurity. Now, Mr. Mohammed Krissassi, how does this war, fought without congressional authorization, affect the most vulnerable populations globally? And is there any mechanism left to hold policymakers accountable for the economic suffering they are causing?
Well, as I said before, I explained what was the key chapters that Clinton was talking about. And what I'm looking at now is the election. That's my best hope, the midterm election that will get back, hopefully, that to a more balanced situation than the one you have now with the new Congress. As I said, economically, it costs $2 billion a day, at today's date. Now, Mr. Trump is asking for 200 billion to continue. We cannot have a prolonged war. It's impossible. Look at now already. You have the degradation in Iran. You have also the defense strain. You have the humanitarian crisis in the Gulf. Maybe, I don't know what are the possible scenario, the one that I'm seeing right now, not only economic, because as I said, economically, we are going to recover. This is, the nature of the thing. But, meanwhile, what we are going to do, President Trump, maybe he's going to declare victory after degrading, as we saw, kind of Iranian capabilities. The oil is going to stabilize between, I'm talking as an economist now, between $90 and $100 the Brent barrel. Another situation, if you continue to answer a question economically, if you go to an uncontrolled escalation, Iran is going to intensify the attack on the GCC country. And the Brent is going to go, yes, at that point, to about $150 to $200 a barrel. Now, again and again, to continue on the economical side, the war will evolve into a broader multi-domain effort, and that is going to be very, very difficult to sustain. I hope, again, that you are going to come back and the economy is going to be on the track. As I said, I said many times, Trump thinks that, the war is good for the economy. No, the war is not good for economy. It's good for the corporate 500. And as you know better than anybody else, Karim, the most profitable industry in every advanced country or advanced economy is the war, is the defense industry. When you have the price of the F-35, when you have the price of the Tomahawk, when you have all this add together, that's also one of the points that you have to look at. And unfortunately, it's part of the world. It's part of the serpent économique, as we said in French. Now, I would like to go to a geopolitical shift because we didn't talk about Russia. We didn't talk about China. That's also two elements that you cannot ignore. Not only because of the oil, it's just because they want to change this hegemony of Mr. Trump. They cannot stay because they are also a power. Look what India did, for example, like we talk about economy. India diversified its source of sourcing from Iran, from the Middle East, to Russia. You have the BRICS also that come into play. And now I hope that we are going to sit down, and I'm not talking like my predecessor did. I don't believe in the diplomacy. They tried. Iran was negotiating in good will, I guess, and they were stabbed in the back, not once, but twice. And the support, he didn't get any support. And the GCC, again and again, I come back to that, they were not expecting to be attacked, but it was the miscalculation. Of course, they should be aware that Iran was going to answer. And now their economy is gone. GCC is not going to recover for at least the 5 or 6 or 7 years coming. Who is going to invest in a country that is devastating? Not going to do it. And the GCC country, they live on what? They live off their tourism, basically, and the investment that they did were in America. And America didn't open the umbrella for them when they need it. And I hope that they will remember that. Mm-hmm. So I try to be very simple in my explanation, but you don't have to be sophisticated to understand that in this war is no winning party. It's just question of geopolitics. The Occident want to go back and want to stay the master of the world. Unfortunately, they have a country and the only one in that part of the world that stand to them, and they were prepared to this for the last 40 years. And the closing of the Detroit of Hormuz is not going to play that much. Yes, now it's playing. Now we stranded the economy because 90% of the oil go through the Detroit of Hormuz. But they are going to find other ways. Other route is going to be a little bit more expensive. But this is the economy. This is la loi de l'offre et la demande. So I again pray God that is going to be peace, and we are going to go to
hopefully, Mr. Mohammed Christassi. This actually leads me to another question to Professor Dr. Haynes Gertner. Dr. Haynes, Russia has condemned the strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, as I asked you before, and blamed the US for closing the Strait of Hormuz. China, meanwhile, has warned of chaos and called for a return to negotiations. Yet, neither Moscow nor Beijing has intervened militarily or imposed any serious costs on Washington. Now, according to you, do you think that perhaps their reaction is a sign of weakness, or are they content to let the United States exhaust itself in another Middle Eastern quagmire while they consolidate influence elsewhere? I mean, what could be the long-term geopolitical play here? Well, it seems that we lost Dr. Gertner again, so I redirect the question to you, Dr. Ahmed Khuzai.
Well, from an experience, if we take the track record of both countries, mostly Russia more than China, let's talk about Venezuela, for example. Let's talk about the allies of Russia, Syria, for example. Those two examples were somehow neglected directly by Russia when things got a bit serious. I'm not saying it's the case here. It's still not evident that they will neglect Iran. But as you just mentioned, one of the most important factors is that Russia and China did not indulge in a full-fledged push for negotiations this time, which says a lot about how the role play will go from there. One side, as you just mentioned, that they are trying to somehow drain the United States and let them just go full-fledged in an open war. But at the same time, it's not playing right for everybody. Wars basically exhaust economies. Wars call for somehow it's messy. Let's put it that way. That erupts basically lots of instability. And today, when it comes to, for example, the rise of oil prices, the most benefit country in the world out of that is Russia. So they're trying to play it in their own benefit, and nobody can play them. They are still world powers. They, of course, have to look after themselves before anybody else, even if that means letting go of another ally.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me turn to Mr. Mu'tasim. Mr. Mu'tasim, we are witnessing the Gulf monarchies being hit again and again, and yet they remain publicly silent about the matter. They haven't responded yet. And at the same time, we can see Iraq, for example, sending convoys of popular aid to Iran despite Western pressure. And can we, in the light of all that I have said, suggest that a new regional bloc is emerging, one perhaps that is no longer willing to align exclusively with Washington?
Well, I mean, it's a rather complex. I mean, no one can, realistically, no one can talk about severing ties between total fallout between GCC countries and Americans. However, I think the aggression in June 2025 sent a very clear message down the spines of decision makers in the GCC countries, whereby that there needs to be a serious realignment or serious reconsideration of the military collaboration or cooperation with the Americans going forward, as your guest has eloquently, Dr. Khuzai has put it eloquently, that no convention or there are no clauses on the contracts or the agreements between America and GCC countries with regard vis-a-vis military bases that stipulate that those American forces should protect the GCC countries. However, their mere presence in the region was a deterrent to Iran, especially that the history of Iran's at least attempts at hegemony goes all the way back to the 50s and 60s. I mean, during the time of the late Shah at the time, before the Iranian Revolution. However, I mean, going back to the present, I think going forward there will be a serious reconsideration, especially that the very reason there were American bases in the GCC region was that they would protect American interests, and they have failed miserably at that. Second, they were there to act as deterrent to Iran, and yet again they have miserably failed at that. And so a question arises: why have those bases at all? Especially in the view of the fact that those bases were, I mean, even funded by GCC governments. And another element that is not really widely spoken of, which is those bases were more or less against the will of the people. Okay, this is a fact that's not really being popularized in media, but it is there. It is an element to be taken into account as well. So, I mean, to sum up, I mean, for all these reasons, I think there will be a serious realignment, a serious reconsideration, not only the military relations with America, but also with the way the geopolitical assets of GCC countries, that is to say, oil wells, pipelines, sensitive infrastructure, water desalination plants, etc. We'll see some roadworks, infrastructure, railways, etc. I mean, there will be a serious reconsideration, realignment, reconstruction, and I think that will entail huge construction projects going forward, and there will be more alliance towards connecting those strategic hubs, not to the Gulf region, not to the Arabian Gulf, but towards the Red Sea. And that might entail in turn a reconsideration of the relation, I mean, the rather complex relation with the Houthis going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you indeed. Let me give a chance to Dr. Heinz Gärtner to ask him about who's winning really this war, according to him, and what's Europe's position in this whole mess.
Who is winning militarily? It seems that nobody is winning right now. The military historian Karl von Clausewitz said there are only two ways how a war ends. Either there's a total defeat by one of the sides, or there is a negotiated settlement. So I can see neither one at the moment. Since I don't see a military defeat, the only option now should be to work for a negotiated settlement. So the one possibility, let me draw an analogy from the Vietnam War. So the one possibility is that the U.S. get dragged more into the war, since they are now sending also a certain number of ground troops, like President Kennedy did before the Vietnam War, and then it became a long war. And also, on the other hand, the other possibility is what President Nixon did to regionalize the war. Of course, it was much too late because South Vietnam was much too weak to resist the Viet Cong. But if President Trump regionalizes the war and give more responsibility to the Gulf states to come to an arrangement and normalization with Iran, it might work as well, and the US could withdraw and stay clean and say we have achieved anyway many goals, killed the leader and destroyed nuclear and missile program, and then there should be, of course, renegotiation of the nuclear file and also arms control, regional arms control negotiations, confidence building measures, and also the new Iran has to recognize Israel's security concerns, but also Israel has to recognize that Iran needs some sort of defense. You cannot rid the Iran of all its defense capabilities. So regionalizing and would be one possibility. But of course, we have Israel here as well. And Prime Minister Netanyahu might have other goals because basically he started the war because he wanted to change the whole Iranian system. This did not work. I don't know whether he will stop here and also allow a regionalization. But without the US, also Israel might not win militarily anymore. And the Europeans should really find a way also to mediate and also not condemn only now Iran, but Iran was attacked. Of course, Iran now attacked the Gulf states, but both the war on both fronts has to end on a diplomatic level. And
since you're saying that it has to end at the diplomatic level, Mr. Haynes, do you think Iran would actually trust another round of negotiations, although they have been failed twice, they've been attacked in the middle of these negotiations? What kind of guarantees, according to you, would Iran require so as to go to negotiating table again?
Yeah, that's definitely true. There's always a suspicion, and if there's no trust, the Iranians might think that the Americans would not recognize an agreement, and also if there is agreement, they might renege this agreement. And the Iranians now think we need a strong defense in order as a security guarantee. But as I said, if the Gulf states are involved and the Gulf states give some security guarantee also to Iran, in not necessarily in security commitments, but political normalization. So there could be some normalization between Iran and Israel. So an extended Abraham Accords. So it would be a political network which could develop a security guarantee. And but having said this, without the basic confidence and trust, this will not work.
Thank you indeed. And since we have only a few minutes left, I would like to ask each guest, or the remaining guest, about the end game scenario, but very briefly, please, because we run out of time effectively. Starting with you, Dr. Ahmed Khuzai, what is the most likely scenario for the coming weeks, according to you?
Hard to tell, but from how the negotiation talks are at so far, here we're talking about two major scenarios. One is that the negotiations will fail and we'll find ourselves at another escalation. Of course, the escalation would start from the Americans and the Israelis and would escalate on Iranian side, and then the Iranians will retaliate over the Gulf states and other Arab states, but mainly the Gulf, and that might be the ticking point for the Gulf. We hope not, but the Gulf is still enduring all these losses, and there is, of course, a ticking point for them to move from defensive to aggressive. Nobody wants to see that happening, but that's the most likely one, as opposed to a diplomatic de-escalation and a preliminary kind of ceasefire that will take place, and then basically negotiations will go further. But I don't see that happening, unfortunately.
Thank you indeed. Mr. Mu'tasim, very briefly, 30 seconds to be precise. From a geopolitical risk standpoint, what are the endgame scenarios? Mu'tasim?
Different blocks. Different blocks that are into play into this. There's a fallout between the defense contractors and the finance sector. That is to say, stock markets, and then you have the IPAC effect or impact. With the Israeli state, we have the Houthis attacks and the Iran attacks. How will they form or shape the narrative? With regard to the Gulf states, will they be able to rearm themselves? Will they enter the war either directly or indirectly? And moreover, will they tolerate or endure further Iranian attacks on them or not? And another question. The fourth block of the force that comes into play is obviously Iran. Will it still have the steadfastness to continue or not? Will it be able to produce more ballistic missiles / drones, etc.? And the last question, whether it will be able to impose its political will, either through war or diplomacy. I mean, the interaction of these four blocks with regard to these factors, I think that will shape the narrative, the future within the next few days, weeks. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Professor Gertner, 30 seconds. From a security perspective, what's the endgame scenario?
Yeah, of course, escalation or negotiation. So that's the choice we have. But also, I could mention China, because China wants to have good relations with all states in the region, all Gulf states and Iran, but also Israel. And also China negotiated already a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So there is some sort of possibilities. But we do not have to wait until the battlefield decides everything, because with many more casualties and civilian will suffer most.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, very briefly, 30 seconds from an economic angle.
Yeah, from an economic angle, I believe that the market is going to find its balance, and it's not the first time that you have a war. It's going to be many to come also. But now, specifically, I would like to conclude by saying I am a Muslim, and I am a man of peace, and I will pray that no mother from Israel or from Iran or from the GCC country will cry because she lost her son for this stupid war that you have there, and the bloodshed have to stop.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, for all your insights, and all goes to all the panel, Mr. Mu'tasim Al-Harith Al-Dawi, also Professor Dr. Heinz Gartner, and Mr. Ahmed Khuzai, as well as Mohammed Chris Sassi. And thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on our channel and trusting us with your time. And until next time, have a good one.